The comment that ended everything wasn't shouted during the fight. It was said with a smirk, quiet enough that she thought I wouldn't hear. I was carrying the last heavy box up 3 flights of stairs, my back aching and sweat dripping into my eyes. She was standing in the middle of the living room of the new apartment, hands on her hips, looking around at the freshly painted walls. This was supposed to be our fresh start, the next big step. I set the box down, the one labeled Kitchen Fragile, and wiped my forehead with the back of my arm. That's when she said it, not to me, but to her friend Ashley, who was leaning against the doorframe, scrolling on her phone. "My ex's place was so much bigger," she said, a little laugh in her voice. "This honestly feels like a downgrade." Ashley snorted, not even looking up from her screen. I just stood there, hidden by the angle of the hallway. A downgrade. For 6 months, I had worked extra shifts, picking up every overtime opportunity I could to save up for this. The security deposit, the first and last month's rent, the moving truck rental, it all came from my pocket. The plan was simple. We'd get this place together. She'd move in first while I tied up the loose ends at my old place, and then I'd join her in a few weeks. It was a 2-bedroom, clean, in a decent neighborhood, and all she could see was how it measured up to a ghost. I didn't say a word. I didn't storm out or confront her. Something inside me went perfectly still and cold. It wasn't just the comment. It was the casual disrespect, the smirk, the complete lack of appreciation for the sweat currently running down my back. It was the realization that I wasn't a partner to her. I was a provider of services, and my services were apparently not up to snuff. I stepped back into the living room, forcing a neutral expression. "Just a couple more boxes in the truck," I said. She turned, her smile bright and fake. "Oh, you're amazing, babe. Almost done." I nodded and walked back down the stairs. The entire way down, my mind was racing, not with anger, but with logistics. The lease for the apartment was in my name. I was the primary applicant because my credit and income were stronger. She was listed as a permitted occupant, nothing more. The utility accounts we had set up yesterday, electric, internet, were also in my name, linked to my bank account. The credit card she used for apartment essentials, the one she'd been using quite a bit lately, was a supplementary card on my account. A downgrade. Okay. I got to the moving truck and leaned against the side for a moment, taking a deep breath. The path forward was suddenly crystal clear. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to try and prove my worth. I was just going to agree with her. This was a downgrade, and she was welcome to it. I grabbed the last 2 light boxes, the ones with her shoes and purses. As I walked back up the stairs, my mind was a flurry of calculations. I finished the move, helped them arrange the heavy furniture, and even mounted her television on the wall. The whole time, she directed me around the apartment, completely oblivious. When we were done, she gave me a quick kiss and said she and Ashley were going out for celebratory drinks and dinner. She said she was too tired to cook in the new place. "Use the card," I said. "Get something nice. You deserve it after such a stressful day." She beamed at me. "You're the best." As soon as they were gone, I started my own plan. I went through the apartment and gathered the few things that were mine. My toolbox, a jacket I'd left here, my spare phone charger. I walked out of that apartment for the last time, leaving her tea on the counter. My first stop was the bank. I had them issue a new debit card for my checking account and immediately changed the PIN on the old one. Then, I went to my credit card's website. I reported her supplementary card as lost and requested a new one for myself with a different number. The old card was now just a useless piece of plastic. Next, I drove to my old apartment complex, the one I was supposed to be leaving in a few weeks. I went straight to the leasing office. I explained that my living situation had unexpectedly changed and asked if it was possible to withdraw my notice to vacate. The manager, a woman who had always been kind to me, looked up my file. She said since they hadn't listed the unit or signed a new tenant yet, I could rescind my notice for a small administrative fee. I paid it on the spot. My home was secure. That night, I sat in my own living room, a place that suddenly felt a lot bigger and more comfortable. I thought about her, out celebrating her downgrade of an apartment. She had no idea that her world was about to get a whole lot smaller. She thought she had successfully moved on to the next phase, with me footing the bill. She was about to find out how wrong she was. The next few weeks were going to be very, very interesting. Update 1. It's been 3 weeks. For the first few days after the move, I heard nothing, which was exactly what I expected. I knew she had plans. She had told me she was taking a week-long girls' trip to celebrate the new chapter in her life, leaving right after she got the apartment set up. I'm sure she imagined me working tirelessly to get my old place packed up, ready to move in and resume my duties as the provider she so clearly looked down on. The silence was a gift. It gave me time to methodically untangle my life from hers. My most important call was to the landlord of her new building. I explained the situation calmly and professionally. I told him that my plans had changed and I would not be occupying the apartment, but that the other listed occupant, my ex-girlfriend, intended to stay for the duration of the lease. I made it clear that while my name was on the lease as the responsible party, I wanted to formally document that I was no longer associated with the unit. The landlord was a bit confused, but understood. He said that legally, I was still on the hook for the rent if she failed to pay. I told him I was aware of that, but that I needed to start the process of separation. He agreed to email me a summary of our conversation for my records. Next, I dealt with the utilities. I called the electric company and the internet provider. I didn't cancel the services. Instead, I had my name and payment information removed and transferred the accounts directly into her name. Since she was a listed occupant at that address, it was a surprisingly simple process. They would be sending her a new contract to sign, and the next bills would be generated for her, not me. The first sign of trouble in her paradise came about 5 days after the move. I got a string of angry texts. Her card was declined at a restaurant, then again at a boutique. The texts were furious. "What is wrong with our card? And this is so embarrassing. Call me now." I didn't respond. I just screenshotted the messages and saved them to a folder on my computer I'd labeled Consequences. A few hours later, the tone of the texts changed. It shifted from anger to confusion. "Did you cancel the card? Why would you do that without telling me? Is everything okay?" She was testing the waters, trying to see if this was a mistake or an intentional act. The silence from my end was her answer. The real storm hit about a week later, when she must have returned from her trip. My phone started ringing off the hook. Calls from her friends, even a call from her mom. I ignored them all. The voicemails were a mix of rage, confusion, and performative worry. Ashley left one saying I was a monster for just disappearing and that my ex was having a panic attack. Her mother left one saying she was very disappointed in my behavior and that I needed to call her daughter immediately to sort out this misunderstanding. Then came the emails. The first one was just a single line, "I don't understand what is happening." The next few were long, rambling messages about how much she had sacrificed for our relationship, how excited she was for our future, and how my sudden ghosting was cruel and unusual punishment. She conveniently left out any mention of her downgrade comment, or the fact that she was comparing our new life to her old one with another man. I finally responded to one of the emails. I kept it short and professional. "Tiara, your comment on moving day made your feelings perfectly clear. You see our life together as a downgrade. I have decided to respect that feeling. The apartment is yours. I have rescinded the notice on my own apartment and will be staying here. The utility accounts have been transferred to your name, and you will need to contact the providers to formalize the new agreements. The supplementary credit card has been deactivated. I consider our relationship over. I will be in touch regarding the lease agreement at a later date." The response was immediate and explosive. She called me every name in the book. She said I was overreacting to a joke. She said I was vindictive and cruel. She accused me of planning this all along, of trapping her in a lease just to ruin her life. It was a masterclass in turning the tables and painting herself as the victim. The most revealing part was what she focused on: the money. "How am I supposed to pay for this place by myself?" she wrote. "You know I can't afford this rent. You set me up to fail." There it was, the core of the issue. It was never about us. It was about what I could provide: the apartment, the lifestyle, the financial security. When I was no longer providing it, I became the villain. She didn't mourn the loss of the relationship. She mourned the loss of her safety net. I didn't reply to that email. I didn't need to. The ball was now in her court. She was living in her new apartment, the one she considered a downgrade. Now she had to figure out how to pay for it. I had a feeling the real fun was just beginning. Update 2. The past month has been an education in just how far someone will go to avoid taking responsibility for their own actions. After my final email, Kiara's tactics shifted from direct attacks to a campaign of manipulation, and it revealed more than I ever wanted to know. First came the attempts at guilt. She started texting me old photos of us from happier times with captions like, "Remember this?" And I thought we were forever. When I didn't respond, she escalated. She sent me a picture of a single plate of sad-looking pasta with the text, "My first dinner alone in our new place. Hope you're happy." The sheer audacity of calling it our place after everything was almost impressive. When guilt didn't work, she tried to use her friends as flying monkeys. Ashley, the one who was there on moving day, sent me a long message about how Kiara was a wreck, not eating, not sleeping, and it was all my fault. She said I had a duty to take care of her, that I had made a commitment. I replied to Ashley with a single sentence. "Were you also there when she called the apartment I paid for a downgrade compared to her ex's place?" Ashley never texted me again. The next phase was the smear campaign on social media. She never mentioned me by name, but she posted vague, dramatic statuses about being abandoned, about trusting someone with her future, only to be left with nothing. She posted pictures of herself looking sad in the new apartment, with captions about how hard it is to start over alone. Her comment section filled up with friends offering sympathy and calling her ex a monster. A few mutual acquaintances who knew the real story tried to defend me, but their comments were quickly deleted. This is where the major twist came in. One of our mutual friends, a guy named Mark, who I'd always been cool with, called me. He sounded uncomfortable. He told me he had been out with a group of friends the previous weekend, and Kiara had been there. According to Mark, she had a few too many drinks and started talking. She wasn't just complaining about me, she was bragging. She told the group that breaking up with me was part of her plan all along. She said she knew she couldn't afford an apartment in this neighborhood on her own, so she played the part of the loving girlfriend to get me to sign the lease and pay the initial costs. Her plan was to live there for a few months, subsidized by me, while she tried to get back with her ex, Liam, the guy whose apartment was so much bigger. She apparently told her friends that Liam was close to leaving his current girlfriend, and once he did, she'd be ready to move in with him, leaving me with the empty apartment and the broken lease. The downgrade comment wasn't a careless insult. It was a progress report to her friend. Mark said he felt sick listening to it and knew he had to tell me. Suddenly, all her actions made perfect sense. The constant comparisons, the secretive phone calls I'd noticed before the move, the entitled attitude. It was all part of a calculated scheme. I wasn't just a provider, I was a temporary placeholder, a bridge to get her from one life to the next. This new information changed everything. My plan had just been to walk away and let her deal with the financial consequences. Now, knowing that she had acted with such malicious intent, I knew I had to protect myself legally and financially in a much more aggressive way. I contacted the landlord again and forwarded him the email, where I had clearly stated my intention not to occupy the apartment. I then sent him a formal certified letter reiterating the same and included a copy of the original lease agreement with my signature and hers as a permitted occupant. I was building a paper trail. My next step was to deal with the lease itself. I knew that if she defaulted, the landlord would come after me for the entire amount. I couldn't let that happen. I reviewed the lease agreement carefully. There was an early termination clause, but it required a penalty equal to 2 months' rent. There was also a clause about subletting, which was strictly forbidden without the landlord's written consent. I had an idea. It was time to force her hand. I sent her another email. This time, it was not emotional. It was a business proposal. "Tiara," I wrote, "I have been made aware of your long-term intentions regarding the apartment and your relationship with Liam. I am no longer willing to be financially responsible for a lease on a property I do not occupy. You have 2 options. Option A, you can find a roommate to take over my portion of the financial responsibility and we can jointly petition the landlord to amend the lease. Option B, you can prepare to vacate the apartment so we can enact the early termination clause. You will be responsible for the 2-month penalty. Please let me know which option you choose within 7 business days. If you do not respond, I will assume you are choosing to default, and I will pursue all available legal options to protect my financial interests, including taking you to small claims court for the full amount of the lease and any associated damages. I attached a screenshot of a text message Mark had saved from that night, where Kiara had written something like, "Just using him to hold the apartment for me until Liam is ready." The game had changed. This was no longer just about her paying rent. This was about making her face the consequences of a plan she thought was foolproof. The silence from her end was immediate and deafening. I knew she was scrambling, trying to figure a way out of the corner I had just backed her into. For the first time in this whole mess, I felt like I was in complete control. The final act was coming, and I was ready for it. Final update. The 7 business days I gave Kiara to respond came and went with complete silence. It was the silence of someone who knows they are trapped. On the 8th day, I got an email not from her, but from her father. It was a poorly disguised threat, full of talk about his lawyers and how I was harassing his daughter during a difficult time. He accused me of emotional distress and financial manipulation. He demanded that I continue to pay the rent for the full year, as a gentleman would. I forwarded his email to my own lawyer, a guy I had consulted as soon as I found out about Kiara's scheme. My lawyer's response to her father was a work of art. It was polite, professional, and utterly devastating. It detailed Kiara's premeditated plan to commit financial fraud, using my credit and income to secure a lease under false pretenses. It included the sworn statement from my friend Mark and a reference to the screenshot of her incriminating text message. The letter concluded by stating that if they chose to pursue legal action, we would be more than happy to enter the discovery phase, and we would be countersuing for fraud and damages. Her father never contacted me again. 2 days later, I received a frantic, tearful call from Kiara. It was the first time we had spoken since the move. She dropped all the pretense. There were no more accusations, no more talk of me being cruel. There was only raw panic. She said her plan with Liam had fallen through. Apparently, he had no intention of leaving his girlfriend and had told Kiara she was delusional. She admitted to everything. She begged me to just keep paying the rent until she could figure something out. She said she would pay me back one day. I listened patiently until she was finished. Then I said, calmly and clearly, "Kiara, that is not an option. You have until the end of the month to either take over the lease fully or vacate the premises. Those are your only choices." She started crying again, saying she had no money and nowhere to go. She asked what she was supposed to do. "That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem," I said, and then I hung up. The end came faster than I expected. The landlord contacted me a week later. Kiara had given him her notice. She was breaking the lease. She had apparently scraped together the 2-month penalty fee, likely borrowing it from her now furious parents. The apartment would be vacant at the end of the month. The landlord was happy to get a clean break and thanked me for being upfront about the situation. He even waived the small administrative fee for the paperwork. The last I heard, Kiara had to move back in with her parents. Her grand plan to upgrade her life had backfired spectacularly, leaving her in a worse position than where she started. She is now living under the roof of a father who knows she is a liar and a schemer. She lost her boyfriend, she lost her independence, and she lost the respect of the few friends who knew the truth. As for me, I'm free. The whole ordeal cost me the initial deposit and the first month's rent, a few $1,000s in total. It's a small price to pay for discovering someone's true character before tying my life to theirs any further. I learned a valuable lesson about trust and about standing up for myself. The revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet and methodical. It was simply refusing to play her game. I didn't yell or scream. I just took away her access to my resources. I let her own plan, her own sense of entitlement be the instrument of her downfall. She called my contribution to her life a downgrade. So I downgraded her life back to a level she could actually afford on her own. She wanted to live in an apartment that was bigger and better, like her ex's. Instead, she ended up back in her childhood bedroom. And that, to me, is the most fitting consequence of all.